Hi everyone, it's Jay West with Directional, or Directions, not Directional, about Directional Changes. Directions is the name of the show. Started a little rough there, but that's okay. Mistakes are normal. We just keep going. So, hey, good to have you here today. And I want to talk to you specifically about giving, and not about necessarily about receiving, although that is part of it, but just about being generous, being kind, looking for needs, looking for opportunities to bless and encourage other people. And I don't really have anything. I have a bunch of things on my mind, but no like itinerary of how I'm going to go through this. Kind of be Holy Spirit led, sharing with you today. But and just as I'm talking about it, I was thinking about just now a friend of mine. They had locally. I walked out of a church one day and I saw their van. They had 4 tires that were just really bald, and I approached them. I said, "Hey, do you know your tires are kind of on the thinning out? It could be dangerous." And they said, "Yeah, but we can't afford tires, and so we're just praying that we make it." And I could afford tires, and it wasn't like I was rich, but I could afford 4 pretty good tires, you know. And so I bought them 4 tires at about $100 each, with the valves and the stem and balancing and all that. And they were so grateful. And it wasn't to get something in return. It wasn't to be blessed. I've been blessed with cars, and maybe I'll share those stories. But it was to just, when you see a need that I can help with, okay? If they needed a new roof on their house, I wouldn't have been able to afford that. If they had needed a brand new car, I wouldn't have been able to afford that. But I could do what I could do. I could afford 4 tires. And sometimes we look at needs and say, well, I could never do that. It's too big. It's too enormous. It's beyond my financial ability. Okay, well, look for the needs that you can help with. Can you give somebody a gift card? Can you give them a $25 gift card or $50 gift card just to go out to eat because they're going through a really rough time in their life? Can you mow their grass? Can you bake them a pie? Can you provide something they need that would help them improve their life just a little bit? Maybe they have a patio or a deck. They don't have any chairs. And you go, well, I couldn't afford a patio chair. Well, maybe you could afford a parade chair. They cost like $10 or $15. It's just looking for opportunities. Leonard Ravenhill said, the opportunity of a lifetime must be seized within the lifetime of the opportunity. And sometimes there's a narrow window of opportunity, and you're right there, and you can grasp it or you can run away from it. And I like to look for the opportunity to grasp it, to say, okay, can I be a part of this? I just had a pastor friend of mine on, and years ago, he had in his church, he had very hard, narrow pews. And it was on my heart's desire to help them get nicer chairs. And I asked him one day, I said, have you ever looked about chairs? He said, yeah, we have, but we would need 100 of them. And I said, okay, and how much do they cost? He said, well, the average cost is $50. Well, $50 times 100, it would be $5,000. I'm like, oh, I don't have $5,000. But I thought, I know somebody else who maybe could help with this. And at the time, my mom had died, and we had a small inheritance, and I was giving money into the community from that inheritance, just as the Lord would provide and show us a need. So I thought, well, I could pay for the first $1,000 at chairs. And so my family, we prayed about it and shared about it. And then I knew of a pastor in town that maybe could give the other $4,000. So I approached that pastor and I said, hey, here's what I'm doing. I'd like to give $1,000. Would you give the other $4,000? Now, you've got to understand, first I got the word to approach the pastor, but don't do it right away. And a number of months went by, like 6, 7, 8 months went by. And my pastor friend, who was going to be the recipient of the chairs, was saying, hey, what's the update with the chairs? I said, honestly, I don't know. I can't ask them yet. I don't have permission to go and ask this other pastor to help me. And finally I got permission, and I went to them, and it was a local church here in town, and they had bought some property. And at the time, for those of you who live in Omaha, the Dodge Expressway was being built all the way out to Elkhorn, and they owned some property out there that the state had to buy back from them so they could expand Dodge Street. And when they did that, they gave them X amount of dollars. And from that money, the elders of this church said, we're going to give 10% of it back to the community. So I think they, as I recall, they got $700,000 for their land, and they were going to give $70,000 back to Omaha. And it's right at that precise moment that I went to them and said, hey, would you help me with this $4,000? And they said yes. But then he added, he said, if you had asked me a week ago or a month ago, I would have said no. So timing was important too. But anyway, the point of the story is that I worked in conjunction with somebody else to bless the pastor that was just here this morning, Pastor James Patterson at Trinity Hope Foursquare Church. And they have those chairs to this day. Beautiful, maroon, soft, just really nice chairs. They got 100 of them. We were able to buy them. But I couldn't do it by myself. I had to actually bring somebody else in. And sometimes God will give you the wisdom on how to navigate that and to ask somebody else to assist you and provide for somebody else. And it's okay to do that. It's like I can do landscape projects. I can trim trees. I love to trim trees, and I learned from an arborist. And I like planting flowers and making your yard look nice and putting some lighting in and maybe a little water feature and all those kinds of things. But if you were to ask me to do plumbing in your house or electrical work, I would blow up your house and then flood it and then, explode it, because I can't do any of those things. So I would have to ask for help in areas where I don't know how to do things. And so it is with giving. I was thinking this morning, I remember a couple of stories that came in my mind. This was early on in my walk with the Lord in terms of being on staff at a church. And we were on staff at a church down in Houston, and we were at a worship seminar out in the country. And they quoted from the book of Acts. I brought my Bible with me, and I probably could have looked this up. And I think it's in Acts chapter 4. It said the people had all things in common, and they gave to each other based on the needs that were there. And when they read that verse, I had this impression: sell your car and give the money away to a poor family in the church. Well, this is a big step of faith for me because, first of all, I only have one car. So if I sell my car and then give the money away, the money that I would use to rebuy another car, I'm not going to have. And so I went to our head elder at the time. His name was Paul, and I said, Paul, would you pray with me about this? And he prayed that the car would sell quickly. Actually, he prayed that it would sell like within a day or two's notice. And then he prayed that it would sell for more than the appraised value. So at the time, this is a long time ago, I was driving a 1979 AMC Spirit. I don't even know if they make AMC cars anymore, but anyway. And this car was oxidized. It was silver, and the paint was bad, and the car would shake when it drove. And it was a stick shift car, and I'm driving this car, and it's called a Spirit. And so I would pray when I'm driving in it just to get there safely. Therefore, I was praying in the Spirit. And, I had this impression: sell my car, give the money away to a family in need. I'm like, this is a big step of faith. And I have no idea what the car is worth. So this worship seminar was on a Sunday. On a Monday, I just happened to be sharing with the janitor of our church. His name is Bill Davis. And Bill said, I have a friend, and his name is Robert Wells, and Robert is a car salesman. He's a Christian. I said, a what? He said, yeah, a Christian car salesman. I said, that's like an oxymoron. I have no idea what that is. I've never met a Christian car salesman. He said, yeah, he's a nice guy. Go talk to him. So he gave me his number. I called up Robert. We met for the first time, and I told him what the Lord had told me. He said, okay, let me have the car appraised. And my car wasn't worth very much, okay? He had two appraisers, and they both appraised it for $250. I thought, wow, that's not worth very much at all. I paid more than that, but that's what it was worth it when I had it. And then he said, why don't you bring the car back to me tomorrow on Tuesday, and I have another appraiser who's out of town. He usually appraises things a little bit higher, and let's see what God does. I said, okay. So anyway, Tuesday morning he comes around. He calls me on the phone. Robert calls me on the phone. He said, I have a buyer for your car. I said, well, what about the appraiser? He said, don't worry about the appraiser. I have a guy that's looking for a car in your price range. And I said, okay, well, you can go ahead and sell it to him. And Robert said, well, if I sell it to him, I'm going to have to charge you a commission. If you sell it, and then I won't charge you a commission. I thought, wow, a car salesman giving up his commission. He must really be a Christian. So, excuse me. So I took the car down there and I met this guy at his lot, and this guy did the thing you see on movies, but not really what you would do to test a car. And I mean, normally if you test drive a car, you'd get in it, start the engine, make sure the radio works, and things are functioning inside. Maybe take it for a test drive. He didn't do that. The guy literally went around and kicked all 4 tires. He just kicked them. And then he looked at me and he said, "I'll give you $600 for it." I thought, wow, $600. That's amazing. And so we went to Robert, and Robert did all the paperwork for free. And so the guy took the keys and took his title, and he drove off. And I'm 15 miles from my house in Houston, which is a very big city, and I don't have a car. I'm thinking, well, take a cab back. This is before Uber. Take a cab back. I don't know what I'm going to do. And Robert approached me, and he said, "So you don't have another car at all?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, I've got a car over here that I use for missionaries who come home from overseas, and you can just drive it for as long as you want. There's no missionaries coming home anytime soon. You can drive it for as long as you want, and I'll take care of it. I'll insure it, and until you're able to find another car and buy one in your price range." So now I've got $600 in my wallet, and I got a pretty nice Buick Regal Landau roof, power windows, power locks, AM/FM, cassette, which was I didn't have in those days. I know some of you watching goes, "What's a cassette?" And anyway, it was a nice car, tilt wheel, cruise control, and so on. And what you got to remember here is that my car, Paul prayed that the car would sell in like 24 hours and for more than the appraised value. The car sold in 24 hours from start to finish. When we started talking to Robert to when it sold, I started talking on Monday afternoon, and it sold on Tuesday morning. And it sold without a for sale sign on it, without any marketing, without an ad in the paper. And it sold for more than the appraised value. Appraised value was $250, it sold for $600. So those were answers to prayer. But I'm still new in this. I'm really new in this. And I've got $600, like, oh, yeah, I give all $600 away, God? And, I'm not even going to get a tax receipt from the church. I just got to give it directly so the people are blessed. And I'm wrestling. And my wife and I decided to go out for dinner that night. And we went out to a restaurant called the Black Eyed Pea. It was in Houston, Texas. Hence, I'm wearing my cowboy hat for Texas today. And we ordered our meal, and it came, and as we frequently did, we bowed our heads and we prayed. We prayed over the meal, thanking God for the meal. And in that prayer, I said, "God, if you really want me to give this $600 away, would you please confirm it? Would you do something that would confirm it so that I'm not out here on my own making bad mistakes or good, I want to be in your will, and I want to do it properly, but I just need a confirmation because I'm new at this." And at the end of our meal, I asked for the check, and the waitress said, "Well, there is no check." I said, "What do you mean there's no check? This is new to me." And she said, "Well, somebody in the restaurant has paid for your meal." I said, "Really?" So I look around real quickly, and going out the door is a man with a lady, and the man looks like my wife's orthodontist. But we're not sure. Just kind of looks like him. And that's the only person we could see that we might know. And it was really crowded. There were still people waiting in line to get in, and the restaurant was packed. So the next day, I called up my wife's orthodontist. I said, "Hey, were you I have a couple of questions. Were you at the Black Eyed Pea restaurant last night?" And they said, "Yeah, we were there." I said, "I think we saw you, and did you see us?" And they said, "Yeah, we saw you." I said, "This is going to sound really strange, and please forgive me if it doesn't apply, but did you happen to buy our meal last night?" And the orthodontist said, "Yeah, we bought your meal." I said, "Why did you do that?" He said, "Well, I'm not exactly sure, but we saw you bow your heads in prayer. And when you did that, we're believers. And God just spoke to us, said, buy their meal." And then I shared with him, I said, we weren't just praying a blessing over the food. We were asking God to confirm. And I told him the whole story. And he was so blessed to hear that story because then he had heard from God as well. And so that evening, we called up this family in our church, and we drove over and we gave them the $600. And it was like a life change for them. $600 was like giving $6 million to somebody else. I mean, it was just so wonderful and so beautifully received, and we could tell that God was in it. And We were able to drive that car for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, 6 weeks. I don't remember exactly how long till we were able to find the right car that we could afford. And I've, for me, all my life except my first car with my dad, I only buy what I can afford. I've never had a car loan with Ford or with Chevy or GM or whatever, or the bank. We just buy what we can afford. And God has blessed me over the years with cars. That wasn't the only car I gave away. I have other car stores. And, you know, the Bible talks about give and it shall be given back to you. And the Bible talks about receiving 30, 60, 100-fold and so on. Those, and I understand those scriptures and I believe them to be true. And they're in this book called the Bible. I believe them because I believe the Bible. But I don't give to get. A lot of people do. And a lot of people watching this might argue with me. That's okay. I give, if I do give to get, I give to get to give again, if you want to say it that way. But the reality is I give because I love the Lord. I love God. And I love blessing God's people or his ministries. And so I don't give to get something back in return. The fact that he does that, it's biblical, it's okay, but that's not my overriding motive. That's not what's influencing me. At one time in my life, that was something that influenced me. But that's not where I live presently. That's not my influence, is for him to give me something back. The fact that he does is a blessing, and it's biblical because he wants to take care of his children. I'll give you another story. I was living in the same place in Houston, and driving to work one day at the church we were involved in, a church on the other side of town had burned down. And I knew the pastor there, and we were listening to Christian radio, and it listed all these things this church needed because the church had burned down, and one of them was a refrigerator. And I remember turning to my family and said, we have a refrigerator. We could give them ours. And it was like kind of startling because we only have one refrigerator. It's not like we have an extra refrigerator out in the garage. We have one refrigerator. It's in our kitchen. It's got food in it. And so we agreed. We said, we're going to trust God in this. We're going to give him we're going to offer our refrigerator. And so I called up the pastor. His name is Pastor Ernie. And I said, Ernie, Jay, I'm so sorry your building burned down. I feel terrible about that. I'm so sorry. I'd like to help you. There's a list of things on the radio this morning. One of them was a refrigerator. We have a refrigerator. You can have our refrigerator. And keep in mind, I only have one refrigerator. I don't have no clue what I'm going to do or how God's going to work this out. And Ernie said, well, that's great. That's awesome. You live so far away from us, though, I can't get down there till Saturday. And I said, well, that's great. Today's Monday. I said, I got to figure out what I'm going to do because I only have one refrigerator. And so we just committed it to prayer. We just started praying and believing God. And that was on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We're praying. We told nobody. Now, I'm telling you right now, I'm telling the world because it's past tense, happened a long time ago. This would have been way back about 1984, 85. And we're just praying. And on Thursday, this lady named Nancy calls me on the phone. She goes, Jay, my husband Ray and I are getting a new refrigerator. And our refrigerator is only about 2 years old. And we're getting a new one. And every time we pray, we feel like we're supposed to give you our old refrigerator. Do you need a refrigerator? And I said, Nancy, you have no idea how much I need a refrigerator. And so I shared with her the story I just shared with you. And then she added, she said, well, this will be perfect because our new refrigerator is coming on Saturday. We'll arrange for our old one to be delivered to your house on Saturday. Would Saturday work? I said, Saturday is perfect. And so as it turned out, the new refrigerator came, and it was a blessing from God. And we just gave that newer refrigerator to the church that burned down. Because to bring the new refrigerator into the house and unload all the food out of the other one and pull the old one out, put the new one in and put it all back in, wait for it to cool down in the freezer and everything, a lot of extra work. So it just seemed like in a practical way, this was the best way to help this church was to give them this refrigerator. And it's better to ship a refrigerator when it's still cold inside. So anyway, God just worked all that out, and it was a blessing and a great encouragement. I put on Facebook this morning about giving, and the two churches I pastored, I was blessed to pastor, one in Kansas and one here in Omaha. I wanted to be a generous church. Isaiah 32, verse 8. Let me see if I can find that passage real fast. I could quote it to you, but I'm going to read it to you instead. And it'll read a little different than how I memorized it, I think. But Isaiah 32, verse 8 says, But generous people plan to do what is generous, and they stand firm in their generosity. Generous people plan to do what is generous. So as a pastor of a church, my goal was to give 50% of the money away that came in, to give it away to bless other ministries, bless people, whoever needed finances. That was my goal. And I remember when I first got to Kansas, this little rural church, they had like $400 in the bank, and they were giving 4% to missions. And I said, our goal is to give 50%. And some of the leaders just laughed at me. He said, that's impossible. We can't do it. No church does that. I said, well, that's my goal. And I was there for 4 years, and we gave and gave and gave and gave, and we got up to giving 35% away. And when I left 4 years later, we were actually giving 35% of our income away. Had not made it to 50% yet, but we were well on our way, and we had $25,000 in the bank. And it was because God honored our commitment to be generous. We planned to be generous. Isaiah 32:8. When I pastored here in Omaha, we did the same thing. The goal was to give 50% away. And we started in smaller increments as money came in and kept going. I didn't even take a salary the first year. And then the second year, I think I took $500 a month. You know, we gave away more money than I took in for salary. And we just gave and we gave and we blessed and we put up flags of other states and nations where we were giving ministry and a little description and we just gave. And I didn't have to even announce the offering. This was before COVID. You know, we didn't pass the plates. We had opportunities where you could give a little bit online. That wasn't really established yet. And in the basket, and we had a big globe with a hole in it, a huge globe on a stand, and that was mission money. People could put that in there. And I would go weeks, sometimes months. I remember going 6 months without even announcing the offering. And people would just give. And people would give, and money would flow in, checks would come in, and resources would come in, supplies would come in, and it was just over and over and over. And we got up close to giving 40% of our income away. We planned to be generous. And we never had a financial problem at either church. Never. And you might say, well, you weren't getting paid that much. Well, okay, but God provided for me, and I could give examples of that too. And eventually I did get a good pay. And I got health insurance and all sorts of things. And it's fine. We trusted God in our giving. Blessing others. You know, there's a passage in 1 Peter that says we have a calling to bless other people. And so I decided to talk to you this morning about these are directional changes because these are life-changing things in your life and my life. Again, God started with us very, very small. I started giving when I was in high school. When I got saved in 1971 watching Billy Graham, I just immediately started giving. And it was easy for me. From my job that I had, I worked at a gas station, I worked at a bank, I worked at a pizza place. I worked as a janitor in the school district. I worked for a hotel. I had a lot of odd jobs, and I would just give. I would just bless and look for ways to bless other people and bless ministries. And I've done it for years, and I'm still doing it to this day. And I could give even more relevant personal examples than some of them I just wrote about on social media, on Facebook. And the week of October 7th, you could go back and find those. If you follow me on Facebook, you could find some of those. But it's been a blessing to do that. It's been an encouragement to do that. And another time, I saw a picture of a friend of mine who works with YWAM, Youth with a Mission, down in Kansas City area. And he had one flat tire, and he jacked up his car, but somehow the jack broke, and the car, when it fell down, all 4 tires blew out, or the other 3 tires blew out. And he put a picture of it, and he's home from country in Europe that he's ministering at. He doesn't have the money. And I wrote him, I said, I get the money. There's another case of buying tires, okay? And it's not like I go around buying a lot of people's tires. Just happen to have 2 stories about it. But they were different. And in this case, they all blew out. He couldn't even drive the car. And I asked him what it would take to buy tires, and he told me, and I sent him a check, and he was able to do that. It was a blessing. The opportunity of a lifetime must be seized within the lifetime of the opportunity. And there's a passage in Galatians that says, as you have the opportunity, do good unto all men, especially the household of faith. So the 2 tire stories and even the refrigerator story is blessing other people who are walking with the Lord. So I'm just being obedient to Scripture. But I'm not doing it to get something back. That's really important. Now, that's scriptural. And for those who confess that, I'm not saying they're wrong, but for me, I just do it because I love God and I love people. I remember one time I gave away property in Texas, and it was $5,000 or $6,000 worth of property that I had out there, and I gave it back. And I didn't get, it's a long story, and I don't have time to share it all, but I didn't do it to get something back. But years later, when I owned a house in Dallas and I had to sell quickly, my house sold, and I made like $22,000 in 1 year. And it was like God blessed me back. He doesn't bless you back immediately normally, but he blesses you back when you need it. And it was several years later that I needed it, and that's when the blessing came back. And so, again, just focusing on what God wants you to do. Maybe it's increasing your tip for the wait staff from 15% to 25%. We were just at a restaurant over the weekend. I gave 50%. Sometimes I give 100%. I just kind of go by what God's leading me to do, to be a blessing to others, to encourage them. And I've had more wait staff come and say, this was perfect timing. Wow, you have no idea how much I needed that extra $10. And for them, it's $10 is a lot, you know. And for me, it's not like I'm rich, but I got lots of $10. You understand what I'm saying? So we have these opportunities to share and be a blessing to others. So as we conclude today, think about directional changes. Think about your giving. Think about your neighbors. Think about your family. Think about your coworkers. Think about where your kids go to school. Think about where you go to church. And are there people there that you could bless, that you could encourage, that you could give something to them, even if it's a prayer, even if it's just time to wash their car for them in their driveway. Okay, just take time to do it for them, bless them. Look for opportunities to bless other people. I believe you're going to be really, really happy that you did it, and God will be a blessing to you. So I just want to thank you for tuning into Directions today. God bless you, and we'll see you next time. This is Jay West. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.